we are living right now, Mark, in using governance structures that are at least 200 years old. We still vote with a piece of paper. Maybe in the AI age, there will be landlords and renters. Landlords like the machine owners that really own the machine, and the machines are producing actually almost 80% eventually of the goods and services. So in my view, in 2025 now, but even in 5 years, if you are anything north of 1 million personal net worth, you should prioritize considering implementing on yourself this freedom stack. Permissionless life at this point means get the documents that enables you to travel, live, do business, access to healthcare in as many countries as possible.
How do you see the ability to sort of stay flexible and move around in these times? All right, Ale. So I want to talk about all things wealth, money, making money, investing money, but also living our best life. I travel all over the world, and you're sort of my European contact. Let's talk about wealth in general before we get into money and ways we can use our money to increase our wealth. But when I think about Europe from an American viewpoint, I see it looks like the European continent is changing quite a bit. Some areas, maybe like in Paris, the UK, seem to be getting very dangerous. Other areas seem to be embracing more freedom and becoming safer. What's going on over there in Europe from your standpoint, and how we should sort of look at living and traveling to these different areas?
That's a great question, Mark. I'm very excited to be here and trying to navigate you and actually our listeners to in this topic. So first and foremost, Europe, it's not a single country. So I always remark this to my American friends, because sometimes you may say, oh yeah, this summer I go to Europe. Okay, yes, but it depends. You can go literally in Denmark and maybe having a more chilling experience in your summer, or you can come in south of Europe and having Texas-like, temperature. So Europe is right now 27, from a European Union perspective, 27 member states, and every member state is a different story. Now, we have some commonalities for sure, but we are even culturally a bit different. And in my view, this is both the strength and the weakness from any perspective. It's fragmentation, and it's, in my view, from an American standpoint and global standpoint, that's also the power of Europe, because we have so much diversity within our, I would say, in our geopolitical continent, Europe, that you can find literally everything. So if you like to surf, like you, for example, well, Portugal, for sure, or even the south of France apparently is one of the best spots ever. Italy, it's an amazing place for if you want to have great food and enjoy the beach, but you won't find, I've never heard any Italian friend doing that much surfing in Italy. So yeah, it's a very diversified, environment. And the UK after Brexit, of course, went out from the European Union. And this is another macro topic, because they had a unique opportunity of becoming the sort of Delaware or Singapore of Europe. And unfortunately, until now, they're struggling. I'm writing about these topics very often. So I'm happy I can dive in from so many angles. Up to you.
Well,
what do you find?
I think more specifically for my audience who are investors and we're trying to build wealth and we're trying to navigate our wealth and our freedom, I think about the way that these nations are changing, and specifically more around the political climate, maybe also the populace as well. And it's changing rapidly. Like areas that used to be safe are now dangerous. Areas that were dangerous are now getting safer. But also tax rates are changing rapidly. So now nations are cranking up the tax rates. They're trying to create exit taxes. And so when it comes to building wealth and then really, like I said, navigating wealth, I think it's important for me to understand what's going on so I could be prepared to navigate around that. If they're going to put some massive wealth tax, unrealized capital gains tax, I might want to leave and move my tax jurisdiction to another country. If they're going to pass some policies, some political policies that I think could put myself in danger or area where I wouldn't want to live, I would probably want to move. And so I guess that's sort of more the angle I was coming from. I know you help people think through those things, and sort of where we're aligned is this flag theory, right? You wouldn't put all your money in one stock. Why do you have all your life in the hands of one country when you could diversify and move your tax base and move your voting base and move your asset base and things like that?
100%. And this is somehow not so well known, especially from Americans, but within Europe, there are very powerful tax exemption methodologies. So let me give you an overview so you can map it out. Portugal, until actually 1 year ago, it had a so-called NHR system. Right now, the new NHR improperly actually called this IFICI. Long story short, with proper conditions, you can pay zero on foreign income for 10 years. But right now, you need to have a local employment agreement in an eligible profession. So Portugal, which is a very cool place where to live, still can be for 10 years upon several conditions, a great tax spot. And this is great because, intra-Europe, in general, even opening bank accounts in a different country and so far and so on, it's quite simple. So Portugal could be on the map. Spain, always be careful about Spain and Italy because sometimes theory and practice differ. So with that disclaimer and caveat in mind, Spain has the so-called regime of the Beckham law that can give you a specific, advantage in terms of foreign income for 6 years, if I'm not wrong. And many have chosen Spain for this reason. Italy, if you are an ultra net worth individual, guys, my take, Mark, is right now, it's the best place where to be. But you need to be probably, with my family, sometimes we make this joke, we aim to go back to Italy using this flat tax system. It works this way. So you pay 200,000 euro every year, and you have essentially a flat tax for you and your family. There are more nuances, but I don't want to make this too boring. The key piece of information is that this regime guarantees you these numbers for 15 years. 1-5. And if you think that you can live in Rome, Milan, or Tuscany and pay 200K every year and that's it, that sounds like magic. So in my view, right now, if you are maybe everything north of 10 million, maybe of yearly income, in my view, it's a no-brainer because you have an incredible quality of life and so many other benefits. Malta, Cyprus, they're also potentially very good places for tax optimization reasons. And in general, this is the primary list. Of course, if you look from a geographical perspective, Monaco is historically, right, the zero income place in Europe. It's probably the place with oldest money, I would say, in general. And each one of these places has so many nuances, and it's never easy because Europe, it's, of course, very serious in terms of regulation. But yeah, you can have your space of freedom, leveraging properly, in the end, these systems. And these systems are built on a basic principle. Every country wants to attract wealth and capital and talent, of course.
Do they really? Because what I see, the UK just passed the largest tax increases since 1993. And when I see that happen, I see lots of wealthy people saying they're going to leave the country. As a matter of fact, in the UK, I see one of the major banks revealed that they are potentially going to pull out and move out of the country because of the tax increases. So you say that they all want to attract this, but it seems like the policies like the UK is doing and historically has shown that when they do these, they're actually driving those people out of the country.
That's a great angle and a great point. Some countries, and depending on the political, I would say, cycle, they adopt the right legislation, the right framework where they are capable of attracting with benefits specific target of population. In the same precise moment, other countries go the other way around. And that's what caused, for example, the exodus from Norway. Norway also introduced some specific unrealized capital gain taxation. Australia is considering to introduce for above a certain threshold unrealized capital taxes. And in my view, the best way to kill an economy and to make your wealthy people actually escape from you is taxing. That should be legal and constitutional. This is my personal opinion. For the UK, we assisted to this so-called UK exodus. And I wrote a post probably 10 days ago, whatever. A lot of people moved from London to Milan. So my interpretation, but it's open to discussion. I would like to hear your point of view. In my view, the real key point is that we don't know how the world even next year or in 5 years or in 10 years will evolve. And it's a constant change. It will never remain stable. So today, maybe one country is optimal for you. Tomorrow, it won't. And in this eternal dance, I would say, it's a sort of ballet of essentially there is an intrinsic tension between individual freedom and eventually government outreach. And in this tension that moves constantly, in my view, there is this whole movement of, let's call it sovereign individual, sovereign collective, people lovers of freedom, and so far and so on.
Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of really good cases. Here in the United States, it's similar. Obviously, we have the federal taxes we have to deal with, but like during COVID, for example, New York and California tried to be the most aggressive, they were the most aggressive as far as the rules and regulations they put people in during that time. But also, those two states have the highest tax rates. And so we saw a massive exodus out of New York, and people went down to Florida, where it was both more free and there's no state taxes. Wall Street was leaving en masse to go down to Florida. Same with California. Everyone left California. A lot of people went to Texas. Again, a place that was more free and has no taxes. And so we see this happening more and more. And I think you bring up a really good point, which is these policies are changing so fast, we don't know what it's going to be in the next couple of years, which is why I think it's important to sort of think ahead and sort of be able to plan for these changes as they come about. So I guess, I mean, how do you see this shaping up, and how do you see the ability to sort of stay flexible and move around in these times?
Great take. And to answer immediately to your question, in my view, what I have seen multiple times from tech founders, ultra networked individuals, investors, also more traditional real estate people, and I also got there for various reasons with my personal life and strategy. I lived in Italy for many years, and I did my whole career. I became I qualified as a lawyer. I made my PhD, etc. I would never thought to leave my country until that moment. And then for startups reason, I founded different companies. I started traveling, and when I started traveling, I inevitably started having in multiple jurisdiction companies, regulated entities, bank accounts, and so far and so on. When you with your own experience, you touch this, I would say, lifestyle, you realize sometimes that ultimately in 2025, do borders really represent an obstacle for your own freedom and for your own planning for your family? I would say they don't, and they should not. And that's very important for me, because let's take examples. Canada, the Canadian approach with COVID, it was objectively over-restrictive and crazy. I was in Dubai at the time. We barely, only at the end, we had lockdowns, etc. So my take and my strong advice is every case is unique, but in general terms, you should get exposure to different jurisdictions in terms of citizenship, residency, bank account, business setups, and so far and so on. Why? Because in most of the markets, in the traditional and non-traditional sense, are forms of arbitrage. And if you think of yourself and your family, you want to put yourself and your family in the best spot, no matter what, and you want to be able to choose every single time. So in my view, in 2025, now, but even in 5 years, if you are anything north of 1 million personal net worth, you should prioritize considering implementing on yourself this freedom stack, at least maybe with an additional residency. And if you can afford it, maybe with a second citizenship. And why not? Maybe trying to open a bank account in a different place so you distribute your access to and your control to your own wealth, and so far and so on. So this is in my interpretation of how to optimize your family future, in my view. And I would just want to make one remark. When I refer to these things, I'm thinking both of wealth preservation, but at the same time, I'm also thinking I'm a big believer that money and taxes are part of a broader, eventually, scheme of optimizing the capability of expressing yourself. And the same for your kids. What I'm trying to say is that it's not just doing the right trust setup for your kid with 10 million in. It's also putting them in condition to express themselves depending on their preferences, of their passion, and so far and so on. And objectively at this point, geography in an interconnected world should not be an obstacle. And in my view, what is the key problem and why we are talking about these topics? We are living right now, Mark, in using governance structures that are at least 200 years old. We still vote with a piece of paper, and the world at this point is fully digital. So there is a friction between old systems and current reality, and that's what we need to deal every day with.
That's a really good point. I talk about that often, how we were sort of trained in this school system that was set up for the industrial era, and we've been given industrial era tools, but
Absolutely.
Now we're in this new age, through the information age, now maybe into the intelligence age with AI. So how do we deal with that mismatch of government that's no longer, a government structure that's no longer sort of relevant in the world that we live in today?
Great question, and I completely agree also with the example of the school methodology. I learned to personally, I can translate still from Latin, ancient Latin and Greek, but until 2017 my English was pretty much at zero. So, and of course there are pros and cons in everything, but I think the right recipe is sometimes we need to we need to unlearn, certain principles when they become an obstacle to ourselves. And in my view, we need to think of citizenship, residency in different terms, in terms of effective effectiveness and strategy. So in my view, you need to sit down as you do financial planning, as you potentially, want to say that you want to improve your physical capabilities for a specific sport. It can be surf, can be gym, whatever. And do a plan with a personal trainer. You exercise every day, and the same for eventually, mindfulness. Let's say that you want to increase your stability and your emotional side, and you do maybe coaching on that side. I find incredible that today we do eventually financial planning, but we don't do any effort sometimes in diversifying from a geographical and geopolitical point our freedom. So in my view, we need to take this matter seriously. And I'm not technically a consultant. I promote a fund. I created a fund structure, but I'm dealing, and from a product perspective, I see this and help many families in finding their solution. I think everyone should take seriously in consideration this matter, because sometimes it's not, you don't need 10 million or 1 million to invest in a country to get a citizenship. You can start with much less. I know I've been this weekend at an event of a friend of mine, where actually, after which we met our common friend that we were referring to, Alex, and there were so many guys, the younger 19-year-old, and this guy has 1 million followers on Instagram, and he's already aware of these issues and getting a Paraguayan, in this case, residency, and studying towards that direction. So my best advice is put on your map at least this area. Maybe today you don't have the tools for solving it, the equation, but you should put in your own strategic map this area as a foundational one for yourself. And also, it's very funny because sometimes, we all live in our city, in our country. Traveling opens your mind, gives you more wider business opportunities, and so far and so on. So start thinking of it in order to be able to ask for assistance and build your own plan.
Yeah, I think about, how the world changed, and sort of back to that industrial era versus the information age. And the internet has now, as you said earlier, sort of connected us. And so now we travel a lot more. And I think we've gone from obviously the big factories, and then we still have the small mom and pops, but those are, brick and mortar businesses that can't easily move. But now today we have the rise of the gig economy and people working remotely. Digital nomads is rising. And I think that's really escalating this. But I also think about Bitcoin. And so with Bitcoin, it's like, I think about something I refer to often, and it's sort of this frame I think from, is permissionless money for a permissionless life. And so when you don't need permission for your money, when you have a borderless money, then do I need permission for my life? Can I just do things? Even in a sense where, like, one of my sisters is a doctor. One of my sisters has a medical practice, but isn't a doctor, but hired doctors. And then my daughter just became a health coach, but she's not a doctor. And my sister that's a doctor is upset because not upset, but a little bit upset, that my daughter, who's this health coach, can work with clients anywhere in the country and do all these things that she as a doctor can't do because she doesn't have permission for. So it's like, we can just learn skills and we can just take these to the market. And we can just have a money that gives us this permissionless life, and we could just move to Portugal or Brazil. And so is that sort of a frame that you think through? And how do you talk to clients about that?
Great angle. I think in these terms, let's see if I address this question and I exhaust it correctly. So you are surely familiar with the Sovereign Individual book, and we are all familiar with the main thesis. So information age, eventually, the initial thesis was, with digitization or a cyber economy, we all would have been more free compared to yesterday. In my view, Mark, we went the opposite way around. So we experienced governments having actually an overreach and an over-regulatory approach. The more the economy has been digitized, the more eventually regulation and boundaries have been digitized, eventually before the technology was ready. Europe, until now, things may change, but until now, Europe has been atrocious, terrible in this. They regulated things before they were reality, before they were economy. So in this world, I think having access to permissionless money is the step one. So everyone at this point should have, this is not a financial advice, but part of their portfolio exposed to Bitcoin. In whichever matter, partially in ETF, partially I always advise cold storage. We always, we all of us advise the same thing. But the thing is, permissionless money, maybe up to 5%, depending, of course, on everyone's preferences. And permissionless life at this point means get the documents that enables you to travel, live, do business, access to healthcare in as many countries as possible, because we don't know how the world will change. And on the AI impact on the next 10 and 20 years of economy, I would like to express my perspective, which is potentially I'm wrong. So maybe this won't age well. In 10 years, someone will resurrect this video. But in my view, the world is going to change in crazy manners that we can't predict. Nobody can predict, including the best R&D team in the world under BlackRock, Goldman Sachs. Nobody can predict it, which means maybe in the AI age, there will be landlords and renters. Landlords like the machine owners that really own the machine, and the machines are producing actually almost 80% eventually of the goods and services, and they will become richer and richer. And eventually there will be renters, those ones probably living out of UBI or digital credits, sort of new mechanics for ensuring minimal, livelihood to anyone. And in my view, we're going towards a polarization. So there will be either Rolls-Royce with handmade crafting cars, or maybe mass market created Teslas and so far, or BYD or whatever else. And in the middle is going to die. So if this is the general trajectory, because I need to be high level, I can't zoom in because we don't know how the things will evolve. My advice is don't give for granted that the current state of the geopolitics will remain as is. Right now, Europe is the place where launching a business is a terrible idea. Today, it's terrible. You should not do it. But my provocation for you is maybe, Mark, in 10 years, in 15 years, Europe has assets that can't be machine replicated. Because we have a lot of culture and things that don't work, but they are beautiful. And maybe beauty and authenticity will be the new currency in the AI age. So if that's the trajectory, what today we give for granted may be doing a 180-degree change. So my thesis is, I'm not going to tell you how the future necessarily will look like, but I am very convinced and opinionated in telling you that the level of risk of not understanding where we are going in the next 10 years brings to an inevitable conclusion. We need to get an edge, including on Europe, including on Middle East, Asia, and so far and so on. And this doesn't mean to eventually be philosophically anti-patriotic, because in my view, the concept of nation and the concept of state is going to, has already evolved in different manners. So we can be nationalist, we can love our nation, even without living our life in the boundaries of our specific state.
Yeah, that's a good thesis. I haven't really thought about it like that, but it makes perfect sense. And it's something I talk about quite often, which is sort of in this age of AI where everything is, to your point, sort of mass produced. I think typically about like from a content angle. And now it's, writing content, it's making videos, all these things. And so now we're starting to see this shift where people are purposely making videos that are very rough and raw and rugged that can't be created by AI. Yeah. And so to your point about sort of some of this culture and beauty coming back, I like that. Let's talk about Bitcoin for a minute, because permissionless money for a permissionless life. How would you say that what do you think people are underestimating about Bitcoin's potential to disrupt the financial world and really sort of usher in this new age?
Also, this one is a great question. So I want to bring in a unique angle in the sense of I'm picking up something maybe more European. So I hope Americans listening, they find this more interesting. So I believe that we have been all used and accustomed to have a sort of sense of hyper respect for institutions. Let me clarify. Respect for institutions, for private or publicly owned, family, state, nation, they are very important. And I think they should be the bedrock of our society forever. But at the same time, we have been induced to believe that every institution has existed forever. So when we look at even the history of our country or of our continent, we believe, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, they were barbarians. Now we are by far more evolved. The reality is that every institution we live in, including the state of the United States of America, every single state. For example, Italy, 1871, the foundation of the Unità d'Italia, Unity of Italy, they are relatively recent. Banking system is relatively recent, although the primordial forms actually have a couple of hundreds of centuries. So what I'm trying to say is we have eventually a bias of thinking that things won't change. Why? Because they have never changed. So I think this is the major obstacle, Mark, in the mind, especially of smart people. Because sometimes I have this thesis, especially for crypto and Bitcoin specifically, the early adopters are 50-50. 50 they are geniuses, and 50 they maybe are a bit above average, because sometimes right, the bigger innovation comes from either the genius or someone who is completely unaware and maybe is not acculturated, and that's why his mind is virgin, pristine, so it's capable of thinking something new without following pre-existing rules. So I believe that's the obstacle in terms of understanding Bitcoin. If you ask me what's the obstacle in terms of adopting Bitcoin, which is a different point, I believe that right now, Bitcoin has already matured a higher degree of reputation, but still, to be very frank, managing a ledger is still something honestly complex. And I personally believe, don't fry me for this, that in my view, the ETFs are a good vehicle for bringing people and normal, I would say, non-specialized capital into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I would say that what is good, like good is a relative term. And so like with gold, let's just use gold for example. Like, I mean, I can just buy some gold. I could buy a gold coin. I could throw it in my drawer, in my room. If I have more gold, I probably just don't want it in my drawer. I might want a safe. And if I have more gold, I might want to put it in somebody else's vault. And if I have more gold, I might want it in a custodian account, like an ETF, that then it could be moved easier. And I have more liquidity to it. And so there is no such thing as good that's like a blanket for everybody. And I would think about Bitcoin sort of the same way, right? It's like if I have a little bit of Bitcoin, I can just put it in the wallet of my phone. If I have more Bitcoin, I should put it into a cold wallet. More Bitcoin, I should probably put into a multi-sig cold wallet. More Bitcoin, I might want a custodian to hold that for me. And so you have different levels, and I can actually utilize all those at the same time. So I do have some gold in my safe and a hardware wallet in my safe, right? I do have, right? And so I do have gold and I do have Bitcoin in these different areas. And so there's no such thing as good. And then I think about, like, you know, to your point, I think securing Bitcoin is extremely easy, but it can become more complex the more security you need. But what happens is if you don't have the technical ability to do that, you actually put yourself at more risk by trying to have more security. So it's this paradox. So I think you're right. And like I said, I think there's a case to have it in all of these locations because you're using it for different purposes.
Wise words. I agree.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about how all of this is changing and citizenship is sort of not only is the money system changing, but citizenship is changing. And I know you're specifically helping people get more citizenship, think about that, move into different jurisdictions. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Fantastic. Yeah, of course. Well, I would like to take the opportunity to clarify that citizenship and residency and tax or fiscal residency, they are three different things. Okay. And I want to bring this in because it's always, it seems obvious, but it's not. So citizenship means it's like an option. You have the option to do something, but you don't have to. You don't have an obligation to. Citizenship means you have certain rights in theory, including the right of living in a country, but you are not required to live in that specific country tomorrow or within 12 months. So citizenship is a very powerful, status that is recognized by a country, and it gives you rights and obligations, not including the one to live in a country. Typically, fiscal residency is eradicated when you spend certain amount of time in a specific country. And this means that typically it's 183 days, but there are exceptions. The US is an exception, India is an exception. So typically, half of the year in one country, like you're in Italy, well, you should at that point pay taxes to the Italian authorities. They will tell you, benvenuto, welcome, and they would want to get your money, okay? So the same for France and Spain. So citizenship in particular, at this point in time, can be obtained via contributions. And contributions to a specific country can take different forms. One form is, well, I spend my time and I work there, so I create value locally into the society. Therefore, for example, if you move to Germany or Portugal or Spain, and you live for 5-8 years, depending on the rules for acquiring citizenship, after a few years of lawful residency, legal residency in a country, when you provide and contribute to the society meaningfully, you can apply for citizenship. upon, for example, knowing a bit of the language, upon integration. So typically, you spend some time, you learn the language, and then you get the passport. Now, this is one way for contributing to a country and gain citizenship. There are other ways. Instead of necessarily living there, so you contribute with moving there with your feet and your energies, you can contribute with money. Those models in the puristic form are called citizenship by investment. You invest, and therefore you acquire the passport. Now, these forms recently became, I would say, unappreciated at the European level, and the Maltese CBI, or Citizenship by Investment Program, has been abolished. Now, without going too much in detail, because it would be maybe a bit too technical, what it really matters, Mark, is...
You said Malta's program got abolished?
Oh, yeah.
And that was like the best one in the world, right? It was like $1 million, I think you had to invest.
Yeah, you should have invested you should have donated 650K minimum, but if you donated 750, you would have gotten the passport in a shorter time frame. So you could have put the money, and you lose the money, of course. And prior to this, before it came to an end, there was donation, then real estate requirements. You should have purchased the house or rented, then donated 10K to an NGO, and in 12 or 36 months, passport. So this was the European CBI, Malta. The European Union, long story short, said, hold on, if you sell your passport as Malta, you are going to acquire the Maltese citizenship, but de facto, you're going to acquire also the European citizenship. And we don't want someone who pays you Malta and then comes to live in Germany, in France, and why? Why we should allow this? Now, the nuances are a bit more complex, and this decision, in my view, ultimately is wrong. So the European Union should have done something different, should have actually allowed Malta to sell their citizenship because it's a sovereign state. Otherwise, we have an hyper overreach of the European Union over the sovereignty of the single states. But the European Union should have, in my view, created a rebalancing effect so that the economic benefits that Malta received, Malta collected, Mark, 1.5 billion in revenues because of donations via this route in the past 10 years. Wow. 1.5 billion. And it's a tiny, have you ever been in Malta? Well, it's a super tiny island, a quite nice place, and it's it's south of Sicily, Italy. So it's literally south of Italy. It's a tiny island, 1.5 billion. So this was the case for CBI. Right now in Europe is not allowed anymore. But RBI, residency by investment, is allowed. Okay. So for example, Portugal right now is the best. Why? You can technically invest there are various routes, but the simplest is you invest in an eligible fund, 500,000 euro, and you need to spend only 14 days every 2 years in the country, plus either language test or online language classes, about 150 hours, and after 5 years, you can apply for citizenship. So this is a different approach to citizenship that is based on an economic contribution. In this case, worth mentioning, it's not a donation, it's an investment. So if you invest in the right fund, hopefully you will see a return over the investment. So these are strategies. Now I'm focusing on Europe, but I can expand if you want for other countries, other geographical areas, where you can expand your citizenship portfolio, keeping in mind, as I was telling you up front, that citizenship does not equate to residency or fiscal residency. And in the case of Portugal, for example, which is probably the program that I'm more actually expert of, you don't need to live here. So this means that you will keep paying taxes wherever you are considered fiscally resident. And other countries had these programs. Spain had a golden visa. It got abolished in April 2025. Cyprus, Bulgaria also, they were CBI programs, they shut down. So when we were chatting before about tensions and changes, this matter is constantly changing. So what today is possible, eventually tomorrow will be restricted or will become a bit more expensive. Even the Italian flat tax, it was 100K per year. And now it doubled, it's 200K. So from a wealth perspective, Mark, my very solid, I would say, recommendation is when every family or every entrepreneur look at this area of topics, should always factor in their decision-making framework the pros and cons, the cost, of course, but at the same time, the risk that the same product, that the same thing, the same strategy will become either unavailable Malta disappeared. Now not available anymore, so you can't do it. Or they will cost much more. So this is the game, I would say, the key levers of this industry.
So you have the ability to buy a citizenship, and then that money is a donation. You give up the money and the money's gone. Another option is then to invest into move there and contribute your time and energy, or you can invest there. And then that could be some sort of an investment, a business, that could be real estate, things like that. And then you want to decide which one you want, because then those passports get you certain benefits. And so what you really want is the most amount of countries you can travel to visa free, I'm guessing, right?
Correct.
So like that's why Malta was like one of the best, whereas you can do it in the Caribbean islands, for example, but then you don't really get access to all the different countries. And typically you could buy it for less than you would invest for. And unfortunately, typically when you invest, you're typically investing into things that maybe aren't the best investments, right? You have to buy some overpriced real estate that probably is not going to cash flow or get your money back out of it at some point. That's sort of what I've seen. I'm curious though, as far as, and I have been seeing them get more and more expensive over the last couple of years, probably because there's more people that want them. I'm curious though, so you said like Spain got rid of their golden visa program. Now you said like in Portugal, it's a 5-year process. So I can apply for it within 5 years, I can get my citizenship. But in Spain, they abolished it. If I had gotten that 5-year residency to citizenship program started before then, am I still grandfathered in and going through that? Or is it over, or they're just not accepting new people?
Correct. So in general, when it comes to Europe specifically, in the one of the key corollary of the rule of law implies that new laws can't be retroactive. This is a general principle, but to keep it simple means that if you got in Spain before they changed the law, your right would have been preserved. So this is a general principle that applies more or less in all Europe. So that's why I always say it's better to be 3 days earlier than one single day late. Yeah.
So tell me about the Golden Visa program in Portugal, because it involves Bitcoin. So it's not invested into some overpriced real estate that you can't get back or some business model that could fail, but specifically I can move Bitcoin into the country. So if I'm already sitting on Bitcoin, I believe in Bitcoin, I'm investing in Bitcoin for the long term, then this could be a good fit.
Absolutely. Let me tell you what we have built. So we built a Bitcoin ecosystem Golden Visa Fund. This means that in essence we created a Bitcoin treasury company, and the fund owned by the fund, and the fund invests in the Bitcoin treasury company. So the ultimate exposure is on Bitcoin via a commercial company in Portugal. We pay taxes here with the company, and we provide to investors a clear pathway to both get exposure to Bitcoin indirectly and at the same time to qualify for the Golden Visa. And there is a direct contribution in the country, and we also are quite active. We try to position Portugal on the tech and the Bitcoin movement map, I would say, worldwide. And we do our best for having a solid footprint in the country. And this model achieved, major success, Mark, so far. We were able to attract many investors, some of them well-known, and we are quite proud of pioneering this model. So the difference has been typically these companies where the funds invest, maybe they hold real estate assets. And now in Portugal is not anymore possible. The law explicitly exclude real estate from the areas of eligible investment. Okay. So this is the model we have created, and we need to the fund technically can receive fiat money by law. So we can help people to exchange Bitcoin immediately for fiat. The fund receives fiat, allocates in the company, but the legal requirement is technically at least the fiat should euro should hit the local bank account.
Okay, so then you receive fiat money. We send dollars or whatever currency that we're using, and then the fund buys Bitcoin with those dollars.
Specifically, the fund with most of the money buys or loans money to the company, and the company is a Bitcoin treasury company, buys Bitcoin via ETFs because it's the most secure way. And we provide, of course, full transparency at the fund level, at the company level.
So then by proxy, basically the funds that I send over are sitting in Bitcoin. And then in 5 years, however Bitcoin goes up, that's how much my investment goes up. And then in 5 years, once I get my citizenship, I can get my money back if I want, and I get the gains of what Bitcoin went up during that period.
Yes, we actually apply 10% of performance fee. So in principle, say that there is 1 million of profit on your own allocation. You take 900K, we take 10%.
Okay.
100K.
But rather than investing into some other type of thing that has all types of operational risk and unknown risk that I maybe don't even understand, if I'm a long-term Bitcoin investor, then basically I have, it's like sort of like buying an ETF. In a roundabout way. I understand there's technical details, but
yeah, technically and legally, it's a fund investment. But let me make this analogy. There is a fund investing in a company which trades luxury cars. So practically, the investor is investing in luxury cars. They can be vintage Ferrari, vintage Porsche. In our case, we don't, of course, at any level invest in vintage cars. We have a specific mandate. We are Bitcoin ecosystem focused, and therefore we buy and maintain a position only in Bitcoin because we are an active player of the Bitcoin ecosystem. So from this perspective, yes, it's like if you are, of course, with a different structure, with a different meaning, and with a different ownership, but you get exposure to Bitcoin. And we try to do our best to make sure that at any level, at least for what is feasible, we guarantee the most efficiency and the most long-term solidity for this model.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground from sort of shaping the future of technology and how AI might shape things, and freedom is changing, and how Bitcoin is also helping to usher that in. What would you say one big idea about freedom in this sort of new tech-driven world is sort of top of mind that our listeners should take away from this?
My very strong idea of freedom and the main rationale that brought me in creating this opportunity with Citizenship is in using Bitcoin as an asset, as a network, as a technology, as a movement, and directly. So if we put away all the legal matters and the legal technicalities from a philosophic standpoint, we are both contributing to the Bitcoin movement and using Bitcoin as a tool for freedom, for yourself, your family, for getting an arbitrage across jurisdictions. And we are going to be the team building similar solutions as soon as they are made available by legal frameworks everywhere in the world, because I believe that Bitcoin treasuries can be an interesting direction, and you, Mark, write about this very frequently. But at the same time, I believe that Bitcoin treasuries can be really used also as a tool for enabling a higher degree of freedom to people. So this is in my view, the big kind of idea of freedom in this modern world. In my view, Bitcoin means freedom, especially because of how technologically built, especially in the AI age, and using Bitcoin companies, the Bitcoin ecosystem, for acquiring residencies meaningfully for yourself and your family. I think this really represents the highest form of freedom in my view.
I love that. And I should have opened up with this, but my path to buying Bitcoin in 2015 was that I was reading a newsletter at the time called Sovereign Man, and it was about being a sovereign man and having multiple passports. And I was working with someone in his network in Panama to open up a trust in Panama so I could open up a bank account there. And if I open up a bank account and put enough money in there, they would allow me to have a citizenship program, or I should say a residency program that would lead to citizenship. And so I had already met with the attorney. We were in the process of setting this up, and I had taken another look at Bitcoin. I'd heard about it for a couple of years. I took another look at it, and I said, wait a minute, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get money out of the banking system, the US banking system. I could just buy Bitcoin. It's the same thing. And it was all about the freedom that I wanted that led me to Bitcoin. And this is basically the same thing. It's sort of the same way. It's instead of putting fiat dollars into another country to go to a residency citizenship, this is a way that I can use my Bitcoin that I have now to increase my freedom and a lot quicker. So I love that. It's a great way to think about that.
Can I add one point that is a bit controversial, but I truly believe in this angle. So in this specific case, Mark, to be very frank, so when you hit product market fit and you go viral, usually there must be a reason. And people in general and on average and on masses, they are intelligent. So if a product really works, and someone from scratch, we raised an important amount of money, I scaled my own account, as you know, next very, very fast. It means that you created something on multiple layers valid. So there is one layer that nobody really emphasizes enough. Now, Portugal strategically is becoming a tech hub, specifically Lisbon. And Portugal is a neutral place culturally in Europe, because everyone speaks English, so you can come here, you can enjoy the time. And they have this very balanced model where, yeah, you need to learn a bit the language, do online classes, you need to still spend time in the country. So it's a legit model. And when you want to put your money somewhere, especially in this area, you don't want the shortcut. You want a serious opportunity. And Portugal is a serious country. It's a serious process. And we created this here because within this serious regime, in my view, you get not only the Portuguese citizenship market. The real value, in my view, is first getting an edge on a country that, in my view, is going to place itself more and more as an innovative country in Europe. And secondly, over the years, think of your kids. You can get a passport for sending your kid in France to learn, to study fashion, or maybe in 10 years, the East Europe, I truly believe so, East Europe will be an economic engine in 10, 15 years, and even more than today. And opportunities are even now right there. Say that your son wants to launch a company, he will be able to operate because he will be European citizen. So the key point that I wanted to remark in terms of freedom is, in my view, within our offering, but I'm not doing a sales pitch, it's a more philosophical analysis on freedom. In my view, Europe is very criticized, and I'm the first one in criticizing Europe so much. But at the same time, the reason why it's ineffective, fragmentation, is the reason why to get exposure here to 27 different economic, cultural, societal systems, it's an incredible opportunity, and it will not be available in 6, 12, 24 months in the current term. So this is why I personally believe very much in what we're offering, and I think that this is a fair offering, especially for the countries that allow these systems to happen, and in the, I would say, in the larger schemes of, from a broader perspective, in my view, and in the grand scheme of things, I think this is also a maneuver that European countries, in my view, they should accelerate also to welcome valuable, wealthy, but also talentuous individuals, and not only be open to illegal immigration.
So you brought up a good point that brings a question. So you talk about if my kids wanted to move to Europe and start a business. So if someone were to buy this golden visa, or I should say not buy it, but invest into a country to receive the golden visa, then that includes the entire family?
Yes, that's correct. And that's crucial. So you need to pay a bit more for legal fees, governmental fees, and every program is a bit different. In Portugal, you can even bring in automatically your parents if they are above 65 years old. If they are below, it's a bit more complex. You need to prove that they're financially dependent from you, but even your parents and your kids. Siblings are not allowed. So this is critical because if you have 2 kids, 3 kids, essentially you can give to your own whole family new opportunity and a new degree of freedom.
And in other places like in the Caribbean, if you were to buy passports, you have to buy those extra ones. So it starts adding up if you have a lot of kids. Man, this is great. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to make sure that we link to all this information down below. It's something that you should definitely check out. We'll put a link to it down below. Whatever you're doing, think about your freedom because, man, the world is changing super fast. And I say the way that we beat uncertainty is with optionality. And so we need as many options as we can because we don't know how the world's gonna change. And this is one way you can do it. So we'll link to that down below. Anything else that people should be paying attention to?
Everything else? No, I think, look, we covered, thank you so much for this interview. I think we covered all these different topics and they are very, very interesting. I think we covered more or less everything. So thank you so much. And I think this was super interesting. I hope we'll receive positive comments and questions, of course.
All right. Thanks so much.